Okay. All right, so I did a couple of the. Starting to get used to this. So, hold on. Up here. Where are you? Sociology 2. And that's just how I'm going to do it. And so basically, that I like how that works. When I add the parentheses, it actually shifts the number to the left. So it actually changes the format of it. I like that. So my plan is this is a priority book. And this is a priority book. And then since this is the most viewed on the channel, so this is priority. So those are the three that I'm going to kind of work on the most for right now. And then biology, physics. I'm going to go ahead and write plus calculus. And then what that does is once I decide to go to the calculus, I can add the chapters here. You just kind of continue these lists as I need to. Maffy Waffy. Atomic. Call it elemental science. Plus organic. All right. Leo. So I just did AV25. So that means let's finish Judges and work my way into Ruth. So Judges 15 to Ruth 2. Okay. JW Library. Bible. Judges 15. Judges 15. After a while in the days of the wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife, bringing a young goat. He said, "I wish to go into my wife in the bedroom." But her father did not allow him to go in. Her father said, "I thought, you must surely hate her, so I gave her to your groomsmen. Is not her younger sister more attractive than she is? Please, take her instead." However, Samson said to them, "This time I cannot be blamed by the Philistines for harming them." So Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and he took torches, turned the foxes tail to tail, and put one torch between each pair of tails. Then he set fire to the torches and sent the foxes out into the fields of the standing grain of the Philistines. He set on fire everything from sheaf to standing grain, as well as the vineyards and the olive groves. The Philistines asked, "Who did this?" They were told, "It was Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he took his wife and gave her to his groomsmen." And at that, the Philistines went up and burned her and her father with fire. Then Samson said to them, "If this is how you act, I will not quit until I take revenge on you." Then he struck them down, one after the other, with a great slaughter, after which he went down and stayed in a cave of the crag of Etam. Later the Philistines came up and camped in Judah and were tramping about in Lehi. Then the men of Judah said, "Why have you come up against us?" To which they answered, "We have come to capture Samson, to do him just as he did to us." So 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cave of the crag Etam and said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines are ruling over us? So why have you done this to us?" He said to them, "As they did to me, so I did to them." But they said to him, "We have come to capture you and hand you over to the Philistines." Then Samson said, "Swear to me that you yourselves will not assault me." They said to him, "No, We will only tie you and hand you over to them, but we will not put you to death." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him from the crag. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines shouted triumphantly at meeting him. Then Jehovah's Spirit empowered him, and the ropes on his arms became like linen threads that were scorched with fire, and his fetters melted off his hands. He now struck a fresh jawbone of a male donkey. He reached out and grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men with it. Then Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, 1 heap, 2 heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I struck down 1,000 men." When he finished speaking, he threw the jawbone away and called that place Ramathlehi. Then he became very thirsty, and he called on Jehovah and said, "It was you who gave this great salvation into the hand of your servant, but now am I to die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" So God split open a hollow that was in Lehi, and water flowed from it. When he drank, his spirit returned, and he revived. That is why he named the place Anhakorah, which is in Lehi to this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines for 20 years. Judges 16. One time Samson went to Gaza and saw a prostitute there, and he went in to her. The Gazites were told, "Samson has come here." So they surrounded him and lay in ambush for him all night long in the city gate. They stayed quiet the whole night, saying to themselves, "When daylight comes, we will kill him." However, Samson kept lying there until midnight. Then he got up at midnight and grabbed the doors of the city gate and the 2 side posts and pulled them out along with the bar. He put them on his shoulders and carried them up to the top of the mountain that faces Hebron. After that, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. So the lords of the Philistines approached her and said, "Trick him and find out what gives him such strength, and how we can overpower him and tie him and subdue him. For this we will each give you 1,100 silver pieces." Delilah later said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great power comes from and what can be used to tie you and subdue you." Samson said to her, "If they tie me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried out, I will grow as weak as an ordinary man." So the lord of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried out, and she tied him with them. Now they set an ambush in the inner room, and she called out to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And at that he tore apart the bowstrings just as easily as a thread of flax comes apart when it touches fire. The secret of his power did not become known. Then Delilah said to Samson, "Look, you have fooled me and told me lies. Now tell me, please, what can be used to tie you?" So he said to her, "If they tie me up with new ropes that have not been used for work, I will grow as weak as an ordinary man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them and called out, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." All the while the ambush was set in the inner room. At that he tore them off his arms like threads. After that Delilah said to Samson, "Up until now you have fooled me and told me lies. Tell me what can be used to tie you." Then he said to her, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head with the warp thread." So she fixed them with the pin and called out to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." So he woke up from his sleep and pulled out the loom pin and the warp thread. And she now said to him, "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? These 3 times you have fooled me and have not told me the source of your great power." Because day after day she kept nagging him and pressuring him. He was weary to the point of dying. So he finally opened his heart to her, saying, "A razor has never touched my head because I'm a Nazarite of God from birth. If I am shaved, my power will leave me, and I will grow weak and become like other men." When Delilah saw that he had opened his heart to her, she immediately summoned the Philistine lords, saying, "Come up this time, for he has opened his heart to me." So the Philistine lords came up to her, bringing the money with them. She made him fall asleep on her knees. Then she called the man and had him shave the 7 braids off of his head, and after that she began to have control over him, for his power was leaving him. She now called out, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." He woke from his sleep and said, "I will go out at other times and shake myself free." But he did not know that Jehovah had left him. So the Philistines seized him and bored his eyes out. Then they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with 2 copper fetters, and he became a grinder of grain in the prison. But the hair of his head started to grow back again, after he had been shaved. The Philistine lords gathered together to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to celebrate, for they were saying, "Our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hand." When the people saw him, they praised their God and said, "Our God has given into our hand our enemy, the one who devastated our land and killed so many of us." Because their heart was cheerful, they said, "Call Samson to provide us some amusement." So they called Samson out of the prison to entertain them. They made him stand between the pillars. Then Samson said to the boy, holding him by the hand, "Let me feel the pillars that support the house, so I can lean against them." Incidentally, the house was full of men and women. All the Philistine lords were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women who were looking on while Samson provided amusement. Samson now called out to Jehovah, "Sovereign Lord, O Jehovah, remember me, please, and strengthen me. Please, just this once. O God, and let me take revenge on the Philistines for one of my two eyes." Then Samson braced himself against the two middle pillars that supported the house, and he leaned on them with his right hand, and on his left hand on the other. Samson called out, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and the house fell on the lords and all the people in it. So he killed more at his death than he had killed during his life. Later his brothers and all his family came down to take him back. They brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah, his father. He had judged Israel for 20 years. Judges 17. There was a man of the mountainous region of Ephraim named Micah. He said to his mother, "The 1,100 silver pieces that were taken from you, about which you pronounced a curse, which I heard, look, the silver is with me. I was the one who took it." At that his mother said, "May Jehovah bless my son." So he gave 1,100 pieces of silver back to his mother. But his mother said, "I will without fail sanctify the silver to Jehovah from my hand for my son to use in making a carved image and a metal statue. Now I give it back to you." After he returned the silver to his mother took 200 pieces and gave them to the silversmith. He made a carved image and a metal statue, and they were put in Micah's house. The man Micah had a house of gods and made an ephod and teraphim statues and installed one of his sons to serve as priest for him. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Each one was doing what was right in his own eyes. Now there was a young man of Bethlehem in Judah who was of the family of Judah. He was a Levite who had been living there for a time. The man left the city of Bethlehem in Judah to find a place to live. While on his journey, he came to a mountainous region of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. Then Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" He replied, "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I am on my way to find a place to live." So Micah said to him, "Stay with me and serve as a father and a priest for me. I will give you 10 pieces of silver, 10 silver pieces a year, and a set of garments and your food." So the Levite went in. Thus the Levite agreed to stay with the man, and the young man became like one of his sons. Furthermore, Micah installed the Levite to serve as a priest for him, and he lived in the house of Milcah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that Jehovah will be good to me, for the Levite has become my priest." Judges 18. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was looking for an inheritance to dwell in, because then they had not received an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. The Danites sent 5 men among their family, capable men from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to explore it. They said to him, "Go explore the land." When they came to the mountainous region of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, they spent the night there. While they were near the house of the Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite man. They went over to him and asked, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is keeping you here?" He replied to them, "Thus and so Micah did for me, and he hired me to serve as priest for him." Then they said to him, "Please ask God whether our journey will be successful." The priest said to them, "Go in peace. Jehovah is with you on your journey." Then the 5 men went on and came to Laish. They saw how the people in it were dwelling in self-reliance in the manner of the Sidonians. They were quiet and unsuspecting, and no oppressive conqueror was in the land to disturb them. They were far away from the Sidonians, and they had no dealings with anyone else. When they returned to their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, their brothers had said to them, "How did it go?" They replied, "Let us go up against them, for we have seen that the land is very good. Why are you hesitant? Do not delay to go in taking possession of the land. When you arrive, you will find an unsuspecting people, and the land is spacious. God has given it into your hand, a place where there is no lack of anything on the earth. Then 600 men armed for battle from the family of the Danites departed from Zorah and Eshtaol. They went up and camped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. That is why that place, which is west of Kiriath Jearim, is called Mahanadan to this day. They went from there to the mountainous region of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land of Laish said to their brothers, Did you know that there are in the houses an ephod, teraphim statues, a carved image, and a metal statue? Think about what you should do. So they stopped there and came to the house of the young Levite man at the house of Milcah and asked how he was. All the while the 600 men of Dan, armed for battle, stood at the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who had gone to spy out the land went inside to take the carved image, the ephod, the teraphim statues, and the metal the image. The priest was standing at the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed for battle. They went into the house of Milcah and took the carved image, the ephod, the teraphim statues, and the metal image. The priest said to them, What are you doing? They said to him, Be quiet, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us to be a father and a priest for us. Which is better, for you to be a priest of the house of one man, or to become a priest to a tribe and family in Israel? So the priest was satisfied, and he took the ephod, the teraphim statues, and the carved image, and went off with the people. Then they turned to go on their way, putting the children, the livestock, and the valuable things ahead of them. They had gone some distance away from the house of Micah when the men who lived in the houses near the house of Micah gathered together and caught up with the Danites. When they cried out to the Danites, they turned to face them and said to Micah, What is the matter? Why have you been gathered together? So he said, You have taken my gods that I made, and you have gone off with the priests too. What do I have left? Now then, can you ask me, What is the matter with you? The Danites replied, Do not raise your voice against us, otherwise angry men may assault you, and that would cost you your life and the lives of your household. So the Danites went on their way, and Micah, seeing that they were stronger than he was, turned and went back to his house. After they took what Micah had made, as well as his priest, they went to Laish, to a people quiet and unsuspecting. They struck them down with the sword and burned the city with fire. There was no one to rescue it, for it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone else, and it was in the valley plain that belonged to Beth Rahab. Then they rebuilt the city and settled in it. Furthermore, they named the city Dan, and after the name of their father Dan, who was born to Israel. But Laish was the city's former name. After that, the Danites set up the carved image for themselves, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons became priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day that the inhabitants of the lands went into exile. And they set up the carved image that Micah had made, and it remained there all the days that the house of the true God was in Shiloh. Judges 19. In those days, when there was no king in Israel, a Levite, who was then living in a remote part of the mountainous region of Ephraim, took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah as his wife. But his concubine was unfaithful to him, and she left him to go to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah. She remained there for 4 months. Then her husband went after her to persuade her to come back. He had his male attendant and a couple of donkeys with him, so she brought him into her father's house. When her father saw him, he was glad to meet him. So his father-in-law, the young woman's father, convinced him to stay with him 3 days, and they would eat and drink, and he would spend the night there. On the 4th day, when they got up early in the morning to go, the father of the young woman said to his son-in-law, Eat something to give you strength, and then you may go. So they sat down, and they both ate and drank together. After that, the father of the young woman said to the man, Please stay overnight and enjoy yourself. When the man rose to go, his father-in-law kept begging him, so he stayed overnight again. When he got up early in the morning on the 5th day to go, the father of the young woman said, Please eat something to give you strength. And they lingered until it was late in the day, and they both kept eating. When the man rose to go with his concubine and his attendant, his father-in-law, the young woman's father, said to him, Look now, it is almost evening. Please stay overnight. Here the day is coming to an end. Stay here overnight and enjoy yourself. Tomorrow you can get up early for your journey and go to your home. Whoever the man... Oh, there's a Jebus. The man did not want to stay another night, so he got up and traveled as far as Jebus, that is Jerusalem. He had with him the two saddled donkeys, his concubine, and his attendant. When they were close to Jebus, the daylight was nearly gone, so the Jebusites, duh. So the attendant said to his master, "Should we stop at the city of the Jebusites and stay overnight there?" But his master said to him, "We should not stop at the city of foreigners who are not Israelites. We will go on as far as Gibeah." Then he said to his attendant, "Come, and we shall reach one of those places. We will stay overnight either in Gibeah or in Ramah." So they went on their way, and the sun began to set when they were near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. So they stopped there and went in to stay overnight in Gibeah. Once inside, they sat down in the public square of the city, but no one took them into his house to stay overnight. Eventually, that evening, an old man came in from his work in the fields. He was from the mountainous region of Ephraim, and he was living for a time in Gibeah, but the residents of the city were Benjaminites. When he looked up and saw the traveler in the public square of the city, the old man said, "Where are you going, and where do you come from?" He replied, "We are traveling from Bethlehem to Judah, to a remote area of the mountainous region of Ephraim where I am from. I went to Bethlehem in Judah, and I am going to the house of Jehovah. But nobody is taking me into his house. We have enough straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for me, the woman, and our attendant. There is nothing lacking." However, the old man said, "May you have peace. Let me take care of anything you need. Just do not stay overnight in the public square." So he brought him into his house and gave feed to the donkeys. Then they washed their feet and ate and drank. While they were enjoying themselves, some worthless men of the city surrounded the house and were pounding on the door, and they kept saying to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came into your house so that we may have sex with him." At that, the owner of the house went out and said to them, "No, my brothers, do not act wickedly." Wow, this is oddly familiar. "Please, this man is a guest in my house. Do not commit this disgraceful act. Here are my virgin daughter and this man's concubine. Let me bring them out, and you can humiliate them if you must. But you must not commit this disgraceful act toward this man." But the men refused to listen to him, so the man grabbed hold of his concubine and brought her outside to them. They raped her and abused her all night long until the morning. Then they sent her away at the break of dawn. Early in the morning, the woman came and fell down at the entrance of the man's house where her master was and lay there until it was light. When her master got up in the morning and opened the doors of the house to go out to resume his journey, he saw the woman, his concubine, lying at the entrance of the house with her hands on the threshold. So he said to her, "Get up, let us go." But there was no answer. The man then put her on the donkey and set out for his home. When he reached his house, he took the slaughtering knife and took hold of his concubine and cut her up limb by limb into 12 pieces and sent one piece into each territory of Israel. All who saw it said, "Such a thing has never happened or been seen from the day that the Israelites went up out of the land of Egypt down to this day. Consider it, take counsel, and tell us what to do." Judges 20. Consequently, all the Israelites came out from Dan down to Beersheba and from the land of Gilead, and the entire assembly gathered unitedly before Jehovah at Mizpah. So the chiefs of the people and all the tribes of Israel took their places at the congregation of God's people, 400,000 foot soldiers armed with swords. The Benjaminites heard that the men of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. Then the men of Israel said, "Tell us, how did this terrible thing happen?" At this, the Levite man, the husband of the murdered woman, said and answered, "I came to Gibeah of Benjamin with my concubine to stay overnight, and the inhabitants of Gibeah rose up against me and surrounded the house by night. They meant to kill me, but they raped my concubine instead, and she died. So I took my concubine's body and cut it up and sent the pieces into every part of Israel's inheritance. Because they had committed a shameful and disgraceful act in Israel, now all you people of Israel, give your advice and counsel here." Then all the people rose up in unison and said, "Not one of us will go to his tent or return to his house. Now this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. We will take 10 men out of 100 from all the tribes of Israel, and 100 out of 1,000, and 1,000 out of 10,000 to collect provisions for the army, so that they may take action against Gibeah of Benjamin, in view of the disgraceful act they committed again in Israel." Thus all the men of Israel were gathered against the city united as allies. When the tribes of Israel sent men to all the tribesmen of Benjamin, saying, What is this terrible thing that has happened among you? Now hand over the worthless men from Gibeah, so that we may put them to death and clear out what is bad from Israel. But the Benjaminites refused to listen to their Israelite brothers. Then the Benjaminites gathered together out of the cities of Gibeah to go out to battle against the men of Israel. That day, the Benjaminites mustered from their cities 26,000 men armed with swords, apart from the 700 chosen men of Gibeah. In his army were 700 chosen men who were left-handed. Every one of these men could sling a stone to within a hairbreadth and could not miss. The men of Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 men armed with swords, and each one was an experienced warrior. They rose up and went to Bethel to inquire of God. Then the people of Israel said, "Who of us should go up in the lead battle against the Benjaminites?" Jehovah replied, "Judah is to take the lead." After that, the Israelites rose up in the morning and camped against Gibeah. The men of Israel now went out to battle against Benjamin. They drew up in battle formation against them at Gibeah. So the Benjaminites came out from Gibeah and struck down 22,000 men of Israel that day. However, the army of the men of Israel showed themselves courageous and again drew up in battle formation in the same place as on the first day. Then the Israelites went up and went before Jehovah until the evening, and inquired of Jehovah, "Should we again go into battle against our brothers, the people of Benjamin?" To this Jehovah said, "Go up against them." So the Israelites drew near the Benjaminites on the second day. In turn, Benjamin came out from Gibeah to meet them on the second day and struck down another 18,000 Israelites. All of them were armed with swords. At that, all the men of Israel went to Bethel. They wept and sat there before Jehovah, and they fasted on that day until the evening, and offered up burnt offerings and communion offerings before Jehovah. After that, the men of Israel inquired of Jehovah, for the ark of the covenant of the true God was there in those days. Now Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, was ministering before it in those days. They asked, "Should we go out yet again to battle against our brothers, the men of Benjamin, or should we stop?" Jehovah replied, "Go up, because tomorrow I will give them into your hand." Then Israel set men into ambush all around Gibeah. The Israelites went up against the Benjaminites on the third day, and they drew up in formation against Gibeah, the same as the other times. When the Benjaminites went out to meet the army, they were drawn away from the city. Then, as the other times, they started to attack and kill some of the men on the highways, one of which goes up to Bethel and other to Gibeah, leaving about 30 men of Israel dead in the open fields. So the Benjaminites said, "They are suffering defeat before us, the same as before." But the Israelites said, "We will retreat and draw them away from the city onto the highways." So all the men of Israel rose up from their places and drew up in formation at Baal Tamar, while the Israelite ambush charged out of their places in the vicinity of Gibeah. Thus 10,000 chosen men out of all Israel came in front of Gibeah, and the fighting was heavy, but the Benjaminites did not know that disaster was near at hand. Jehovah defeated Benjamin before Israel, and on that day the Israelites struck down 25,100 men in Benjamin, all of them armed with swords. However, the Benjaminites imagined that the men of Israel would be defeated when they retreated from Benjamin, but they retreated because they trusted in the ambush that they set against Gibeah. The ambush acted quickly and charged toward Gibeah. Then the ambush spread out and struck down the whole city with the sword. Now the men of Israel had arranged that the men who ambushed the city would make a smoke signal go up from there. When the Israelites turned around from the battle, the men of Benjamin started by attacking and killing about 30 men of Israel. And they said, "They are clearly suffering another defeat before us, just as the previous battle." But the signal started to go up from the city as a pillar of smoke. When the men of Benjamin turned to look, they saw the whole city going up in flames to the sky. Then the men of Israel made an about face, and the men of Benjamin were dismayed, for they saw that disaster had overtaken them. So they retreated from the men of Israel toward the wilderness, but the battle followed them. The men coming out of the cities joined in striking them down. They surrounded the Benjaminites and pursued them relentlessly. They trampled them down directly in front of the Gibeah toward the east. Finally, 18,000 men of Benjamin all fell, all mighty warriors. The men of Benjamin turned and fled into the wilderness to the crag of Rimmon, and the Israelites killed 5,000 of them on the highways, and they kept pursuing them as far as Gedom, So they struck down 2,000 more men. All those of Benjamin who fell on that day amounted to 25,000 men armed with swords, all mighty warriors. But 600 retreated into the wilderness to the crag of Rimmon, and they stayed on the crag of Rimmon for 4 months. And the men of Israel turned back against the Benjaminites and struck those of the city with the sword. From men to livestock, all that remained also, they set all the cities in their path on fire. Judges 21. Now the men of Israel had sworn this oath in Mizpah: not one of us will give his daughter to a man from Benjamin as a wife. Consequently, the people came to Bethel and sat there before the true God until evening, crying out and weeping bitterly. And they were saying, "Why, O Jehovah, the God of Israel, has this happened in Israel? Why should one tribe be missing today from Israel?" And the next day, the people got up early and built an altar there to offer up burnt offerings and communion offerings. Then the people of Israel said, "Who of all the tribes of Israel did not come up to assemble before Jehovah?" For they had taken a great oath that anyone who did not come up to Jehovah at Mizpah would be put to death without fail. So the people of Israel felt sorrow over what had happened to Benjamin their brother. They said, "Today one tribe has been chopped off from Israel. What should we do to provide wives for those who are left? Now that we have sworn by Jehovah not to give them any of our daughters as wives." They asked, "Who among the tribes of Israel did not come up to Jehovah at Mizpah?" It so happens that no one had come from Jabesh Gilead into the camp where the congregation was. When the people were counted, they saw that none of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead were there. So the assembly sent their 12,000 of the mightiest men. They commanded them, "Go and strike down the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the sword, even the women and the children. This is what you should do. Every male, as well as every woman who has had sexual relations with a male, you should devote to destruction." Among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead, they found 400 girls who were virgins, who had never had sexual relations with a man. So they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Then all the assembly sent a message to the Benjaminites on the crag of Rimmon and offered them peace. So Benjamin came back at that time. They gave them to the women whom they had kept alive from the women of Jabesh Gilead, and they did not find enough for them. And the people felt sorrow over what had happened to Benjamin, because Jehovah had made a division among the tribes of Israel. The elders of the assembly said, "What should we do to provide wives for the remaining men, since all the women were annihilated out of Benjamin?" They replied, "There should be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, so that a tribe may not be wiped out of Israel. But we are not allowed to give them wives from our daughters, because the people of Israel have sworn, 'Cursed is the one who gives a wife to Benjamin.'" Then they said, "Look, there is a festival of Jehovah from year to year in Shiloh, which is north of Bethel and east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem and south of Lebonah." So they commanded the men of Benjamin, "Go and set an ambush in the vineyards. And when you see the young women of Shiloh, come out and join in their circle dances. Each of you should come out from the vineyards and seize a wife from the young women of Shiloh, and you should return to the land of Benjamin. And should their fathers or their brothers come to make a complaint against us, we will tell them, 'Show us favor for their sakes, because we could not provide each one a wife by war, and you could not give a wife to them without becoming guilty.'" So the men of Benjamin did just that, and they carried off a wife from the women who were dancing. After that, they went back to their inheritance and rebuilt their cities and settled in them. And the Israelites dispersed from there at that time, each one to his tribe and his family, and they departed from there, each one to his inheritance. And in those days there was no king in Israel. Each one was doing what was right in his own eyes. Nice. That is the end of the book of Judges. Book of Ruth, chapter 1. Now in the days when the judges administered justice, a famine occurred in the land, and a man went from Bethlehem in Judah to reside as a foreigner in the fields of Moab, he along with his wife and 2 sons. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were the Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah, and they came to the fields of Moab and remained there. After some time, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. The men later married Moabite women. One was named Orpah, and the other named Ruth. They remained there for about 10 years. Then the two sons, Malone and Chilion, also died, and the woman was left with her two children and her husband. So she started out with her daughters in law to return from the fields of Moab, for she had heard in Moab that Jehovah had turned his attention to his people by giving them food. She left the place where she had been living with both of her daughters in law, and they were walking on the road to return to the land of Judah. Naomi said to both of her daughters in law, "Go, return each of you to your mother's home. May Jehovah show loyal love to you, just as you have shown it to the men who have died and to me. May Jehovah grant that each of you find security in the home of your husbands." Then she kissed them, and they wept loudly. They kept saying to her, "No, but we will go with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Can I still give birth to sons who could become your husbands? Return, my daughters. Go, for I have grown too old to marry. Even if I could hope to find a husband tonight and could also bear sons, would you keep waiting for them until they could grow up? Would you refrain from getting remarried for their sakes? No, my daughters, I feel very bitter for you, because the hand of Jehovah has turned against me." Again they wept loudly, after which Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and departed, but Ruth stuck with her. So Naomi said, "Look, your widowed sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. Return with her sister-in-law." Ruth said, "Do not plead with me to abandon you, to turn back from accompanying you. For where you go, I will go, and where you spend the night, I will spend the night. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May Jehovah do so to me, and add it, if anything but death should separate me from you." When Naomi saw that Ruth insisted on going with her, she stopped trying to convince her, and they both continued on their way until they came to Bethlehem. As soon as they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city became stirred up over them, and women were saying, "Is this Naomi?" She would say to the women, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made life very bitter for me. I was full and when I went, but Jehovah made me return empty-handed. Why should you call me Naomi when it is Jehovah who opposed me and the Almighty who caused me calamity?" This is how Naomi returned from the fields of Moab along with her Moabite daughter-in-law Ruth. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Ruth 2. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side who was very wealthy. His name was Boaz, and he was of the family of Elimelech. Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Let me go out, please, to the fields and glean among the ears of grain behind whoever looks on me with favor." So Naomi said to her, "Go, my daughter." At that she went out and began to glean in the field behind the harvesters. By chance she came upon a plot of land belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and said to the harvesters, "Jehovah be with you." And they replied, "Jehovah bless you." Boaz then asked the young man in charge of the harvesters, "To whom does this young woman belong?" The young man in charge of the harvesters answered, "The young woman is a Moabitess who returned." Oops. All right, let's finish reading this. Oops. Shoot. Bible. Ruth to. Let's move the mic close to my face. To whom does this young woman belong? The young man in charge of the harvesters answered, "The young woman is a Moabitess who returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab." She asked, "Please may I glean and gather among the cut off ears of grain left behind by the harvesters?" And she has been on her feet since she came this morning until just now, when she sat in the shelter for a short rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, do not go away to glean in another field, and do not go anywhere else. Stay close by my young women. Keep your eyes on the fields that they harvest, and go with them. I have commanded the young men not to torch you. When you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the young men have drawn. At that she fell face down and bowed to the ground and said to him, "How have I found favor in your eyes, and why have you taken notice of me when I am a foreigner?" Boaz answered her, "A full report was made to me of all you have done for your mother in law after the death of your husband, and how you left your father and your mother in the land of your relatives to go to a people whom you had not known before. May Jehovah reward you for what you have done, and may there be a perfect wage for you from Jehovah, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge." I'm almost done with this. Then I'll be quiet. To this she said, "Let me find favor in your eyes, my lord, because you have comforted me and spoken reassuringly to your servant, although I am not even one of your servants." Boaz said to her at dang it. Boaz said to her at mealtime, "Come here, eat some of the bread, and dip your piece in the vinegar." So she sat down beside the harvesters, and then handed her some roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied, and she had something left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, "Let her glean even among the cut off ears of grain, and do not mistreat her. You should also be sure to pull out some ears of grain from the bundles for her, and leave them behind for her to glean, and do not say anything to stop her." So she continued to glean in the field until evening. When she beat out what she had gleaned, it came to about an ephah of barley. Then she took it and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw that she had gleaned. Ruth also took her and gave to her the food that was left over after she had eaten her fill. Her mother-in-law then said to her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? May the one who took notice of you be blessed." So she told her mother-in-law about whom she had worked with, saying, "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz." At that, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by Jehovah, who has not failed in his loyal love toward the living and the dead." Naomi continued, "The man is related to us. He is one of our repurchasers." Then Ruth the Moabitess said, "He also told me, 'Stay close by my young people until they have finished my entire harvest.'" Naomi said to her daughter-in-law Ruth, "It is better, my daughter, for you to go out with his young women, than to be harassed in another field." So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz and gleaned until the barley harvest, and the wheat harvest came to an end, and she kept dwelling with her mother-in-law. End of Ruth 2. And I believe that is the end of AV26. Ruth 2, AV26, yeah, that's it.